A deadly crisis sweeping across America. An epidemic that knows no boundaries.
He collapsed within 15 minutes of coming out of that bathroom.
It is murder, and my son didn't get to learn from his mistake.
Her 4-year-old daughter somehow ingested fentanyl.
She was my only child.
That's equal to 302 million deadly overdoses in the United States. That's almost everybody in the United States. A deadly crisis sweeping across America. This penny is the size of a lethal dose of fentanyl, and every 9 minutes, a loved one is lost in an instant to fentanyl poisoning. Families shattered, dreams cut short, and an epidemic that knows no boundaries. How can a single pill take a life? And what can be done to stop this silent killer from claiming more victims? The heartbreaking stories of parents who never saw it coming. My first guest, Kamal, lost his 22-year-old son, Ethan, to fentanyl poisoning just days before his college graduation. Now, I say fentanyl poisoning. I didn't say fentanyl overdose because it's not an overdose. It's outright poisoning. And it is absolutely tragic, and the people involved are going to be talked about tonight. Kamal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Phil, and I have to commend you for the great work you've done on bringing awareness to this epidemic.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry to have to do it, but it's tragic what is happening to our young people, and among them is tragically your son, Ethan, who on May 17th, 2021, asked you to go to a casino. You replied, your call. I mean, he's a young man. He can do what he wants to do, but you guys have always been very close and great communication. And we see on the text message that you guys exchanged that was the last text between Ethan and Kamal. Dad, is it all right with you if I go to Mohegan Sun for the night with my boys? We'll be back tomorrow. Your call, Ethan, okay, I'll be back tomorrow. Leaving now, wanted to say bye, but didn't want to disturb. Your response, okay. That was your last communication with him, is that right?
That's correct.
I'm so very sorry for your loss. And your son, Ethan, tell us a little about him. He certainly didn't have a drug problem, we know that. What else can you tell us about him?
No, Ethan was... Every child is special, but Ethan was the most amazing child you could have ever wished for. From the very beginning, he was intelligent, he was empathetic, he had a very high IQ and EQ, and he played sports. He played billiards. He was a champion billiardship player. He was the high school valedictorian. He always excelled at everything he did, he even did a radio show while he was in college. So there was never a day I wasn't proud of him. He was just an incredible child.
And how did he get exposed to this fentanyl that poisoned him and took his life?
Yeah. So when he wanted to go to the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut to celebrate his graduation with his friends, he was winning. He was having a good time. His friends went up to bed, and he was targeted by a known drug dealer who's been dealing for decades. He was specifically targeted because he looked like a young kid who was having a good time, and he made a mistake. Look, I'll always admit Ethan made a mistake when he agreed to go into that bathroom with the dealer named Gerard Santiago. And in that bathroom, he was given a drug laced with fentanyl. We believe it was cocaine laced with fentanyl, and small amounts will kill you. And he collapsed within 15 minutes of coming out of that bathroom. And he could have been saved, but he was not attended to for 11 minutes. 5 minutes to even call EMS, 7 minutes to even check his pulse, and in no time was he given Narcan to revive him.
That, of course, is shocking in its own right, but he went back out, resumed his place playing, and he just collapsed out of the stool, and you say he just laid on the ground there for several minutes before anybody came to attend to him. This is obviously terrible. And we're talking about this. This is an epidemic proportion of what's happening right now. And we're talking about anywhere between 80 to 100,000 people a year that this is happening to. There's very few times that you'll see it on camera like we do here, because there are so many cameras in this casino. And this has to be horrifying for you to have to look at and see. And I understand that this dealer had been banned from this casino, should have never been there in the first place.
That's correct. He was banned years ago. And as far as we are aware, he's been in that casino multiple times since that ban. And he provided his ID because he was questioned as a witness by the Mohegan Sun police, and he was let go even though he's on the trespass list. So he was allowed to walk away scot-free. It took years and a monumental effort by the DEA and by the U.S. Attorney's Office to even bring this case to justice. And it took, I would say a lot of work, more work than it should have taken. The Mohegan Sun police been on their game. The Mohegan Sun also stopped two bystanders from assisting him in that process.
That's just so tragic. And you believe that he knew there was fentanyl in this substance that he was giving to Ethan?
Not at all. For sure he didn't know. Ethan never took fentanyl in his life. Ironically, if he had, he might have survived. Ethan was what's called opioid naive. He had never had an opioid in his life. And therefore, the impact on him was pretty severe. Only takes about 2 milligrams of fentanyl in order to kill, an adult. And it does act within 15 minutes. And you see the signs. You see the videotape of Ethan dimming out like a light bulb. And that dimming is a classic sign of a fentanyl poisoning or overdose. And I do appreciate you using the word poisoning here, because he had no idea what was in what he was taking. As many families and, as many victims of this scourge have no idea what they're taking. It's just inserted in everything in the supply these days.
Well, and that's the tragic thing. And you may have misunderstood my question. I was asking, do you believe that Gerard Santiago knew there was fentanyl in the substance that he was giving to Ethan?
Either he knew or he didn't care. Gerard Santiago later was set up through a confidential informant and on video and audio was caught distributing fentanyl and other illicit drugs to a set-up buyer, a confidential informant buyer. This is after he knew Ethan died. And he watched them take Ethan away. He left after Ethan collapsed, didn't say a word, circled around, watched them take Ethan away, and then he continued selling drugs, including fentanyl. So I would say specifically in that batch of cocaine, did he know there was fentanyl? I don't know if he knew there was fentanyl. I can definitively say he didn't care if there was fentanyl there.
He continued selling even after he knew what had happened.
That's correct.
Now, how long did it take to get accountability here, to get him arrested and prosecuted?
It took 3.5 years to get this case to justice.
Come on, why is that?
Look, it is hard to prosecute on these crimes. The evidence is not clear. Here, thankfully, we had the evidence. The Mohegan Sun was not willing to give up the evidence, so the DEA had to really force the evidence, including that videotape that you've seen. And there was a time where drugs in the 80s era and the Reagan era, where there was a lot of criminal activity, there was a lot of arrests, a lot of people lost their careers, their livelihood, small amounts of drugs and drug possession. That has become a boomerang now, where many states are unwilling to prosecute cases like this. They believe that jail is not the answer. It's not going to fix the problem. But I have a different point of view. I have a point of view that says the rights of victims have to go higher than the rights of criminals. And it is a deterrent. Jail is a deterrent for these crimes, and dealers should care about what they're distributing.
I couldn't agree more. And coming up, Kamal's biggest regret as a parent. That's next. $36 trillion. That is the U.S. debt, and it gets deeper and deeper by the day. Our debt has never been higher, nor have the stakes. The government is looking to slash the federal budget by $2 trillion, and no one knows what that will mean for your job, savings, and future. I've seen a lot in my time, and there's one thing I know for sure. You need to prepare before it's too late. I trust Preserve Gold to help protect my wealth and I strongly urge you to do the same. They are the only precious metals firm I trust and recommend to my family, friends, and audience, and they have a special offer just for you. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue throughout 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 today.
Savannah was a great young lady. She loved playing volleyball. I always thought she was going to be a lawyer. Kids go through a lot these days. When she died was actually in a pretty good place. Unfortunately, that night, Savannah got a name from a friend of hers and purchased a pill to help her calm down. Savannah was not an avid drug user. She didn't take pills on a regular basis. But unfortunately made this decision. She came home, gave us hugs. Unfortunately, my husband found her the next morning, dead in her bed. I don't want any mother to go through what I've gone through.
And so she got this pill through a friend who got it from a friend who got it from social media or somewhere, ordered it, right?
Yep.
Was there any Xanax in her system at all?
No.
But it had fentanyl in it. 42% of these counterfeit pills have lethal doses of fentanyl in them. That's almost a 1 in 2 chance if your kids are buying these pills on the internet that they're going to wind up dead when they do that. Kamal's 22-year-old son, Ethan, had no idea the danger he was facing when he went with buddies to a casino to celebrate his upcoming college graduation. Now, the thing that I want to emphasize here is that in this day and time, drugs that you buy on the street, you have to assume that they are potentially lethal, because fentanyl is flooding into this country at an unbelievable pace. Now, Ethan didn't realize fentanyl was laced into everything that's out there. But when kids are buying drugs, whether it's cocaine, something they may think is benign as something to treat ADHD that they might take to get through finals or whatever, fentanyl is making it into so many of these drugs. And every pill that a kid buys on social media is counterfeit. 100% of them are counterfeit. And the DEA tells me that close to half of those pills are going to have lethal doses of fentanyl mixed into them. And you say, well, why? Why would they want to kill their customers? They're not trying to kill their customers. They're trying to hook their customers, and they just don't know what they're doing. And they mix fentanyl into these drugs, and they become lethal. So that's what happened in this situation, I'm sure. And Kamal, what kind of conversation did you have with Ethan about drugs, and how did that conversation go, if you had it?
Yeah, we had multiple conversations about drugs. And, I was raised in a very strict household, and I never took recreational illicit drugs in my life. And we talked many times about the dangers of drugs. And the only thing I knew for a fact that Ethan did was recreational marijuana. And I was not happy about it. And, I didn't turn a blind eye, but I also wasn't going to separate myself from my son over recreational marijuana.
Right.
What I didn't realize is that one day he'd cross the line, and he had promised me he would never cross that line. But, you are celebrating something, you're doing well at a casino, you've had a few drinks. It's easy as a 22-year-old to cross that line. We've all made mistakes as a kid. And he made that mistake. And my regret on that discussion is not, hammering into him the idea that fentanyl is everywhere and can kill you, because I didn't have the awareness at the time. I always thought this was someone else's problem. I didn't think this was a problem that could affect my family. And I was wrong.
Well,
and that's a message I want to give to everyone.
And that's the reason that I'm so grateful for you coming and having this conversation and using this tragedy to help others and save them from the same conversation. Because if you're watching this conversation that we're having right now, Kamal and I, then it may cause you to have that conversation with your child, because they get around friends and they get around people that say, hey, listen, I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you. And the truth is, it's like playing Russian roulette, but there's a bullet in every other chamber. I mean, it's just so high risk. And you just simply cannot allow your kids to be naive about this, because it literally is everywhere. You can get it on these social media platforms. You can get it delivered to your door, just like you can order a pizza and have it delivered to your door. And that's the downside of technology. But Kamal launched a free mobile video game in August of 24 called Joanne's Vision to raise awareness. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Joanna's Vision came out of the work we're doing in a nonprofit I set up called Preclivity on the day of Ethan's funeral. And we spent a year building this game, and it took a team of 40 people. And the game is modeled after my own family. We went to a funeral not really knowing what happened. We had no idea what really transpired in the casino that evening. It was much later. We didn't see the videotape until trial because the Meganson was not willing to share that videotape. So we saw that videotape at trial. And the game starts with Joanna, who's the sister of a kid named Tyler, who she loses to a fentanyl poisoning. And at that funeral, she has no idea what happened to him, and neither does the family, just like our family didn't. And she goes on a quest where what's different about Joanna is that she has supernatural powers. She has the ability to touch objects and people and have flashbacks about what happened to them. And she's able to piece together. This game takes hours to play. It's like a movie with decisions and mini games. And through the course of the game, she gets what she wants, which is a quest for justice for the people that did this to her brother. But in that process, she understands that fentanyl can be in everything. She understands what to look for. What are the signs of an overdose or a poisoning? And through that game, she's able to rescue people using naloxone. So the game also teaches youngsters about what is naloxone, what are the signs, and how to save a life.
Yeah. Well, I think that is very creative, and I think you're using a tragic situation to touch others, and I know Ethan would be very proud of all of this, and we're going to keep talking about this tragic epidemic as we move forward. We're going to talk about another parent's worst nightmare, and that's how peer pressure and a poisoned pill cost a 15-year-old his life. We'll add them to the conversation when we come back. Tonight, we're talking about the war on fentanyl and families shattered by this poison. Anne never imagined she'd be speaking at the Republican National Convention, but losing her 15-year-old son to fentanyl poisoning gave her a mission. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I really appreciate your being here. I know it would be much easier not to be.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
And Weston was the oldest of four of your children, right? He was your firstborn?
Yes.
And you say he succumbed to peer pressure and took what he thought was Percocet. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As I was just speaking with Kamal, the father of Ethan, all of these pills that these kids are getting are counterfeit. I mean, every one of them is counterfeit. We get some of these pills that are seized, and they may look like Percocet, they may be stamped like Percocet, and when they're broken down and analyzed in a lab, they have 0 Percocet in them. They may have all kinds of other things, from drain cleaner to flour, sugar, and fentanyl. And you say that Weston was actually targeted and stalked by an older boy at school. How did that all come about?
You know, I'll never know the story other than Weston was at a new school. He wanted to fit in. There was a crowd that was definitely a lot of fun. He knew better than to take anything or do any drugs ever. We had so many conversations. But, you know, what I probably underestimated was that Weston could be susceptible to peer pressure. And I believe in the end that peer pressure is what got him.
Yeah, and listen, it's so tragic here. Both Ethan and Weston were being young people. That's the thing. It isn't that these were kids being bad kids, bad young men. Kids are susceptible to peer pressure. They do get out and get to celebrating and make a bad decision in a moment, but the penalty for that shouldn't be death. That's the whole problem here with this fentanyl poisoning. So you give in to peer pressure in a moment. That means you make a bad choice, and so you go do some prank somewhere, or you do something that maybe you shouldn't do. But when you've got these pills flooding in to the United States, and let me talk about what we're up against here, because if you look at seizures, DEA fentanyl seizures for 2024, we're talking about serious flooding. There were 47 million plus pills that were seized, 6,000 pounds of powder, and that's equal to 302 million deadly overdoses in the United States. That's almost everybody in the United States. That's 302 million deadly doses that could take people's lives. There's only 336 million people in the whole country. That's how much is going on. And at one point, they seized just powder, and a 2 milligram dose is lethal, and they seized about 7,500 pounds. That's 226,000 lethal doses per pound, and you're talking about 1.72 million doses just from that one seizure. My God, if you look at how many people have been poisoned by this, if you count up the number of soldiers that were killed in combat in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam, it's 536,000 people. There have been more people over the last several years killed by fentanyl poison than have been killed in those wars combined. You think we're not under attack? We are under attack. This is coming out of China. It's going to the Sinaloa cartel and being put into pill form, or powder coming into the country to be put into pill form. They busted one pill mill that was turning out 70 to 80 million pills a month. And not all of them are coming to the United States, but a lot of them are. And that's what you guys are up against. I mean, Weston, what chance does he have? He makes one mistake and his life is gone. This is murder. This isn't an overdose, Ann. This is murder.
No, it is murder. And my son didn't get to learn from his mistake. Our generation, we did stupid things and we learned from our mistakes, but these kids are dying from them. When something is being laced with fentanyl and you don't know it's there, it's the equivalent of you walking into a restaurant, ordering a glass of wine and getting grape juice and cyanide. There is no difference. This isn't something that he did. Yes, he should not have done, something stupid. However, he was a teenager and he was coming into his own. Teenagers do stupid things. He was not a perfect kid, but he was a good kid. And he was, he had a budding future. He was a great athlete. He was a good student, similar to the story I just heard before me. Just a great kid. And he did not deserve to die from this.
No, as was Ethan's, valedictorian of his class. All right, coming up, Ann's theory on why her son succumbed to peer pressure. We'll be right back. I'm here with two very brave parents, Ann, who lost her son, Weston, 14, and Kamal, who lost his son, just graduating from college, Ethan. Families shattered because they fell victim to this epidemic of fentanyl poisoning in America. Weston, Ann says, gave in to peer pressure at high school, took one pill that he thought was Percocet, and it turned out to be laced with fentanyl. Ann, what do you think made him vulnerable to this peer pressure?
I do believe he was preyed upon. I believe that these drug pushers are the same as drug predators, you can call them, just like a sexual predator. They look for people that they could groom. My son was a pretty innocent kid from a private Christian school. He was the first time he was going into a large school. He was vulnerable. He was stalked for sure. He he had been asked many times, and at one point, my son yelled in front of a lot of people at Starbucks, "I don't want any, leave me alone." So this was something where I do believe he was stalked. This was a murder investigation. And I think eventually he just, in a moment of weakness, a lot of people are around, everyone's having fun. He had hurt his hand about a week and a half or two before that, and he had x-rays, and the doctor actually asked him if he wanted Percocet, and I said, no, thank you. We'll do Motrin or Tylenol, it's just fine with us. But he had heard of it, and maybe he thought he could get away from it, away with it, and score some cool points. And for whatever reason, he tried it. And for what they believe is he tried a quarter of a pill. And it was less than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, and it still killed him. So it does not have to be 2 milligrams, and especially maybe because he was a child. But he was also opioid naive because he wasn't addicted to opioids. So
that's the case with both Ethan and Weston. And when it's new to your system, you are hypersensitive to it. And, both of these young men, the thing, it's not a chance to learn from your mistakes because it's one and done. And the thing we know about young men is their brain's not through growing until at least 25, and a lot of research says 35. And the last part of the brain that grows is the neocortex, which is the part that is judgment, foresight, the ability to see around corners and predict the consequences of your actions. So it's just tough. It's just not fair. And, Kamal, your son was older, but he didn't have experience with this, and he didn't have a chance to learn. And nobody was there with Narcan. Nobody was there that stepped up and tried to give him a second chance and reverse this. And that's tragic because with this epidemic, we need to all be on point to recognize what's going on and intervene quickly and effectively.
It's bewildering to me, Dr. Phil, that we don't do mandatory education around the dangers of fentanyl in public schools at all. This is not a mandatory thing at all, and I think it should be.
Well, it certainly should because, just think about it. We're talking about 100,000 people that are lost to this in some years, and certainly close to that in several of the years past. Think about what would happen if that many people were lost in airline crashes. That would be like one a week going down. It would be a screamer headline on every newspaper, on every TV show. People would be up in arms about this, but it doesn't seem to get the attention of people the way that it should be. This is epidemic. This is a major invasion. As I said, we're getting to the level that's been lost in 4 major wars here, but people don't seem, I don't know if they think, well, these are drug addicts killing themselves. No, that's not true. These are everyday kids. These are regular, healthy kids that are getting sucked into this, and this stuff is coming from China and the cartels, and it is an invasion on America. Why is this not a national emergency? That's my question. Why is this not a national emergency?
I believe it. I believe it's because of stigma. I think it's because people don't believe it can happen to them. And people believe it can happen to them. They deal with the threat much differently. And there is stigma around drug use, and I understand the reasons for it, but I think we need to destigmatize drug use, become more empathetic, treat it as a disease, which is one issue, right? The things we're talking about today are not about addiction. They're about poisonings. But if you destigmatize and you take the right approach and the right awareness and the right training and the right legal change, I think there are low-hanging fruits around awareness. I think there's low-hanging fruit around harm reduction. There's low-hanging fruit around criminal justice. I think there's low-hanging fruit around supply. If you handle all of these 4 issues properly, and this is a government issue, it's a federal and state and local issue, these deaths can go down dramatically from numbers like 80 to 100,000 to less than 10,000. I don't think we'll ever get to perfection. I don't think we'll ever get to 0.
We can certainly make progress with the things you're talking about. All right, coming up, a hidden danger lurking where a mother thought her little girl would be safe. We'll talk to her next. Well, joining us now is Cheyenne, who also was just shattered when her precious 4-year-old daughter full of life and innocence, accidentally ingested fentanyl. I mean, can you imagine, 4 years old, and you talk about opioid naive, of course. And Cheyenne lost 4-year-old Brighton to fentanyl poisoning while she was sleeping over at a friend's house. Cheyenne, thank you so much for being here. I see you've got a big 6 behind you there. Tell us why.
Thank you. Yeah, so Brighton's birthday was on January the 26th, and me and her family celebrated her. Her dad's birthday also was on the 26th, but the big 6 there is for Brighton. She would have been 6 years old on Sunday.
Oh, wow. And Brighton was a miracle baby, right?
Yes, she was. Brighton was not, according to the doctors, supposed to be here due to her rare diagnoses of Turner syndrome. And during that time of my pregnancy, they wanted me to have an abortion. And I told them no. Of course, I underwent a lot of major health issues with her being in my womb and things like that. Brighton was in the NICU at UK Children's Hospital for a little over a month, but Brighton lived. She lived a wonderful life, a beautiful life. She was so smart and her life, unfortunately, was cut very short.
Yeah, and originally they thought her passing was connected to her condition and to a heart defect, correct?
Correct. The morning that I took Brighton to the hospital due to her not breathing, the doctors found a cup of fluid on her heart. And for about 3 weeks, that's what they had thought the cause of her death was. So due to the fluid and her heart defects, which comes along with Turner syndrome, and that unfortunately was not the case of Brighton's death.
So what did happen? How did she get the fentanyl in her hands?
So that is a question that I'm not for sure if I will ever have the answers to. The detectives don't have the answer to, and neither does the coroners have the answer to how Brighton ingested fentanyl or how she got a hold of it. The case is still ongoing, and there are certain things that I can't talk about due to those individuals not being in jail currently at this time.
Right, I understand, and I don't want to do anything to put that case in jeopardy or anything at all, so I respect that 100%, but certainly as a 4-year-old, she picked something up somewhere, somehow, and ingested it, and at such a young age and small weight, and in addition to being frail in some ways, it probably didn't take much at all. And I wonder how you process this when you find out, wait a minute, everything you were doing, everything you were fighting, that's not what did it. She was poisoned.
Yes.
How did you process that?
I still process it every day. It's very hard. I have a strong support system around me, and I go to therapy and things like that, but it's still hard to know that Brighton's death was considered a homicide due to the negligence and carelessness of other people. And I do believe that they do not have a bit of care nor empathy as to what happened due to their actions that had been shown in court in 2024 and 2023 when they were arrested but were released on house arrest. I miss Brighton every day. She was my only child, and I do everything I can to celebrate her birthday and things like that, because Brighton deserves to continue to be celebrated, and she's my life still. And I keep going not only for her, but for other people, to be the voice for her and other people. As I had always said, I will be Brighton's voice, and that's what I am doing.
Well, of course. More about this tragic situation after. We're back with Kamal and Ann and Cheyenne. And Cheyenne was devastated when an autopsy report revealed her 4-year-old daughter did not die of some of the health issues that she had struggled with since birth, but somehow ingested fentanyl during a sleepover. And I mean, you can just imagine how learning that your child has been casualty to fentanyl poisoning. And Cheyenne is spreading awareness through the Bright Light Foundation, named after Brighton. And this is just another angle of pushing back against this and fighting against it. And Cheyenne, you say you'll never stop keeping her voice alive and continuing to talk about it until there's no air left in your body, right?
Correct. With the Bright Light Foundation, and even outside of the Bright Light Foundation, I always say Brighton's name, I always bring up memories of her. But specifically with the Bright Light Foundation, I do a lot of speaking events. I speak at different addiction centers, even though I have never been an addict. I've never sold drugs or anything like that. But as Kamal was saying earlier, there is a stigma, and the stigma needs to stop because there's no discrimination when it comes to fentanyl. As we can see, my 4-year-old daughter, Brighton, is gone to this epidemic, and the lives that are being taken at such an alarming rate through this epidemic. We offer additional educational resources for parents, grandparents, teenagers, and other things like that. So we are being a voice. I'm being the voice for Brighton, along with many other organizations and other families that have lost their loved ones.
Well, I'm so glad that you're doing that. And when we come back, I'm going to share some final thoughts. But why is this drug pouring into this country? And why is it so deadly? I'll answer that question for you when we come back. What percentage of the counterfeit pills are assumed by testing by the DEA to have lethal ingredients in them?
So last year, the DEA seized about 80 million fake pills. 7 out of 10 of those pills have a potential lethal dose of fentanyl. The Mexican cartels and our adversaries are killing more Americans than any terrorist organization in the history of this country. But our government, we're not educating kids in our schools about this. This is unheard of. We've never seen this, Dr. Fell.
We're back and we're talking about this tragic fentanyl epidemic. And a very good friend of mine is Derek Maltz. He thought he was retired, but he's not. He's now the acting director of the DEA. And we've talked about this so much, and we all have to agree to raise awareness about this. When you look at fentanyl's strength, people don't understand how powerful this is. But fentanyl's strength, when you compare it to heroin and morphine, it is 50 times stronger than heroin. And you think about people that are on heroin and how much it disrupts their life. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. And that's why it can kill people so quickly. It shuts down their respiratory system. And that's why Weston never had a chance. That's why Ethan never had a chance. That's why Brighton never had a chance. This is powerful stuff. There's just no way that we can allow this to continue. And I guess I'll take these few seconds and say this. Every one of you that's watching right now needs to talk to your kids, your grandkids, whoever, and let them know they've got to not take pills off the street. It can be deadly. That's all I've got to say. You've got to tell them it can be deadly. We're out of time, so I want to thank all of my guests tonight. Kamal, your 4 points are just so critical. Thank you for sharing those. Ann, thank you for sharing about Precious Weston. And Cheyenne, thank you for the Bright Foundation, and I hope you'll continue to be a voice. I appreciate all of you for sharing your stories. Through compassion, awareness, and enforcement, we can fight this fentanyl epidemic. I appreciate all of you watching. speak to the young people in your lives. We'll see you next time.